What if I told you that your constant striving, fixing, overthinking, and controlling is the very reason life feels heavy? That your breakthroughs don't come from doing more, but from finally doing nothing. Yes, nothing. Because in that stillness, the truth begins to speak. And when you stop forcing life, life begins to flow. You've been taught your entire life that action is the answer. Hustle harder, push more, chase it until it breaks. But what if the deepest transformation happens not through effort, but through surrender? What if the very thing you've been running toward begins to find you the moment you stop chasing it? This isn't a call to apathy or giving up. It's an invitation to radical alignment, to trust in the rhythm beneath your chaos, to surrender control without losing your direction, to understand that the universe doesn't respond to noise, it responds to energy. And the quietest energy often speaks the loudest. When you finally stop, when you do nothing, everything that is meant for you starts falling exactly where it belongs. We often chase because we believe something is missing. We feel a gap, an absence, a sense that we are not yet where we are supposed to be, and so we run. We pursue goals, relationships, success, clarity, anything that will fill the void. But in this very act of reaching, of grasping, we move further from what we are trying to attain. The mind, when agitated by desire, creates turbulence, and in turbulent water, even the clearest reflection becomes distorted. What if I told you that the more you chase something, the more you push it away? Not because it is running from you, but because your desperation clouds your perception. You can't see truth clearly through the lens of urgency. You believe you are taking control of your destiny, but you are only amplifying the noise that keeps you from hearing what life is already trying to tell you. Desire is not inherently wrong. It is a natural impulse of the human condition, but when desire turns to desperation, it becomes a distraction. You begin to pursue shadows instead of substance. You chase validation instead of connection, achievement instead of meaning, movement instead of presence. And all the while, you miss the quiet unfolding that is taking place in the background of your being, the slow, steady rhythm of something wiser that needs no force to function. There is a difference between aligned action and restless movement. One emerges from deep within and feels almost effortless, like breath. The other is loud, anxious, and urgent, as though something terrible will happen if you stop. But nothing terrible happens when you stop. In fact, what's terrible is that you never do. You never pause long enough to ask, why am I running? Who told me that I had to earn love? Who made me believe that success must be fought for like survival? And what if none of it was true? When you stop chasing, what's real begins to catch up with you. You stop mistaking exhaustion for accomplishment. You stop measuring your worth by progress. And you start noticing the subtle signs of alignment. The effortless conversation that opens a new door. The idea that arrives without struggle. The synchronicity that speaks more clearly than logic. These are not random. They are the result of stillness. They are the gifts that only come when you are not forcing them. The tragedy is not that people fail to reach their dreams. The tragedy is that they chase the wrong ones, never realizing the right ones were already nearby. It is the constant motion that blinds them. In always looking ahead, they never look around. They never see that they are already in the place where meaning begins. Not in the imagined future, but in the lived present. You think you must earn your peace. But peace isn't a reward, it is a return to the self, unburdened by striving, unshaken by the demand to prove. The moment you stop doing what you think you're supposed to do, the false structures begin to fall. And yes, there may be fear in that collapse. You may feel the silence as uncomfortable, but what follows is clarity, the kind that does not come from thought, but from recognition. You begin to remember what truly matters and what never did. This is not passivity. This is not weakness. This is a higher form of awareness. It takes more courage to sit in stillness than to run in fear. It takes more strength to trust the current than to swim against it out of panic. But if you can allow yourself to stop, truly stop, you will see the illusions will begin to crumble and something authentic will remain, something that was never missing, something that does not need to be chased because it was waiting for you all along. And that is the moment everything begins to fall into place. Stillness is one of the most misunderstood states of being. In a world obsessed with momentum, silence is seen as a void, a lack, an absence of progress. People grow restless in its presence, as though something vital is being missed. But what is often missed is not out there in the world, it is within. Stillness is not the absence of life, it is the place where life finally becomes visible. When the noise fades, when the doing ceases, something deeper begins to stir, something that speaks, not in commands, but in whispers. We are trained from an early age to associate value with action. The more we do, the more we are praised. The more we accomplish, the more we are seen. And so we become addicted to movement, to productivity, to effort. Even in our attempts to grow spiritually, we often treat the inner life like a task to be mastered. We try to force breakthroughs, to accelerate healing, to reach some imagined state of perfection, but the soul cannot be pushed. It opens only in silence. There is a clarity that emerges only when all the effort has stopped. It does not come from trying to find answers, but from creating space for answers to arise on their own. Stillness does not mean nothing is happening. On the contrary, it is the environment in which everything essential finally has room to unfold. The problem is not that life isn't speaking to you, it's that you haven't been quiet enough to hear it. When the mind slows, the unconscious rises. Images, feelings, memories, insights, things you had buried or ignored, begin to emerge, not to disturb you, but to free you. But you must be willing to stay with it. You must resist the urge to turn away, to distract yourself, to fill the silence with more doing. This is the challenge of stillness. It reveals what your activity helps you avoid. Yet in that revelation lies your liberation. When the noise stops, the truth begins to surface. You start to recognize the inner architecture of your life, the motives, the fears, the desires that have quietly been shaping your decisions. And once you see them, you no longer need to be ruled by them. This is how awareness grows, not through constant stimulation, but through quiet observation. Stillness also teaches you timing. There is a season to everything, and not all seasons are meant for action. Some are meant for waiting, for integration, for rest. When you ignore this, you exhaust yourself trying to force what isn't ready. You plant seeds and demand fruit the next day. But the wisdom of life does not rush. It does not bloom by pressure. It opens in its own time. Stillness helps you sync with this rhythm rather than resisting it. In the silence, you begin to feel what is real. You start to sense the difference between what is true and what is merely loud. The world is full of noise, full of opinions, full of distractions that promise certainty but deliver confusion. Stillness returns you to your own voice, the one that doesn't shout but simply knows. That voice doesn't push you into panic or doubt. It doesn't argue or beg for attention. It speaks with a quiet authority, and when you finally hear it, you wonder how you ever lived without it. This voice is not something external. It is your own deeper self, the one that has been waiting patiently beneath the surface, beneath the striving, beneath the noise. When you do nothing, you allow it to emerge. When you let the world spin without your interference, when you release the need to control or prove, this inner clarity rises, not in chaos, but in calm. And here's the truth. The more you learn to rest in stillness, the more everything outside begins to organize itself. not because you made it happen, but because you stopped getting in the way. Clarity is not something you chase. It is something that finds you when you finally become still enough to receive it. So let the world keep spinning. You don't have to chase it. Stand still and watch what starts to return. There is something within you far more intelligent than your conscious thoughts. It lives in the background, quietly shaping your instincts, your dreams, your emotions. It doesn't speak in sentences or offer logical explanations, and yet it is always working, organizing, healing, guiding. This force is the unconscious, and it is the hidden architect of your life. You've been taught to rely only on what you can see and plan and control, but the truth is that the deepest changes occur when you step aside and allow the unconscious to do its work without interference. The mind is a remarkable tool, but it becomes a tyrant when it believes it must manage everything. You try to think your way into healing. You try to calculate your way to purpose. You attempt to solve your pain like a puzzle. But your soul does not speak the language of logic. It speaks in symbols, in patterns, in moods and impulses and synchronicities. It moves not in straight lines, but in spirals, and its progress is often invisible until suddenly something shifts. A weight lifts, a truth is seen, a direction becomes clear, and you realize something within you had been rearranging things all along. When you consciously step back, when you stop trying to fix yourself, to rush the process, to demand results, you allow this deeper process to breathe. Think of it like a wound. You don't heal a cut by staring at it, worrying about it, poking at it to see if it's better yet. You clean it, you protect it, and then you leave it alone. Healing happens beneath the surface. So it is with the soul. Your task is not to rush the unfolding, but to trust that it is unfolding. What makes this difficult is the illusion that if you are not actively doing something, nothing is happening. This is a lie. The unconscious never sleeps. Even in stillness, it works. In fact, especially in stillness. That is when it has the most space. The more tightly you grip your thoughts, your identity, your need for control, the more you suffocate the process that is trying to carry you forward. When you release that grip, even slightly, you create a gap through which something else can enter. You've had moments like this before, even if you didn't recognize them. A sudden insight that came not from analysis, but from silence. A solution that emerged only after you stopped thinking about the problem. A shift in your behavior that occurred not from force, but from grace. These are signs of the unconscious doing its work. It does not move by your timeline. It does not care for your impatience, but it is always precise, always purposeful. The only requirement is that you learn to cooperate with it, not by controlling it, but by getting out of its way. Letting go is not passive. It is an active trust. It is a decision to stop interfering with a process that knows more than you do. You are not giving up responsibility, you are surrendering to something wiser. This is the paradox. When you do less, the deeper parts of you do more. And over time, they bring you to a place that your conscious mind could never have designed. There is intelligence in your dreams, in your sudden emotional shifts, in the images that flash through your mind when you least expect them. These are not random, they are messages, signals, movements of the deeper psyche, and the more you learn to listen, not analyze, not judge, but listen, the more you begin to understand their rhythm. The unconscious does not scream, it waits, and when it is finally heard, it speaks clearly. So give it space. Stop forcing clarity. Stop demanding transformation on your schedule. The more you try to control the process, the more it retreats. But the moment you allow stillness, you invite it to move freely. It will not fail you. It is always trying to lead you back to wholeness, but it needs your permission, not your control. Let go of the need to understand everything right now. Trust what is moving beneath the surface and allow your becoming to unfold without your interference. Control is a word we've come to associate with strength. To be in control is to be capable, to be prepared, to be safe. We build our lives around it. We control schedules, emotions, conversations, outcomes. But what if I told you that most of this need for control is not a sign of strength at all, but a subtle form of fear? What if the grip you have on life is not keeping you afloat, but slowly suffocating the very thing you wish to experience? Peace. The need to control is rarely born from wisdom. It is born from the belief that if you don't hold everything together, it will all collapse. You convince yourself that your constant effort is the only thing standing between you and chaos. But this belief isn't true. It's inherited. Somewhere in your life you were taught that trust was dangerous, that surrender meant weakness, that letting go meant being abandoned, exposed, defeated, and so you built a shell around your heart and called it discipline, resilience, focus. But underneath it, there is fear. And fear is the real master of the life lived in control. You try to manage every outcome. You try to shape people's perceptions, anticipate their reactions, prepare for things that haven't happened. But in doing so, you exhaust yourself. You become tense without realizing it. Every moment becomes a negotiation. You stop living and start performing. You stop being and start defending. And all of this stems from one central illusion, that if you loosen your grip, everything will fall apart. But what if the opposite is true? What if the falling apart is not the threat, but the beginning of what's real? What if letting go isn't the end of control, but the start of freedom? There is a hidden power in collapse, not the destructive kind born from despair, but the transformative kind born from truth. When you allow what is false to fall away, what remains is what was always authentic. The image you've curated may crack, but the self beneath it will breathe. The plan you've clung to may dissolve, but a deeper rhythm will emerge. You won't be empty. You'll be free. Life does not need to be micromanaged. It needs to be felt. And you cannot feel what you do not trust. Control creates walls, subtle, invisible barriers between you and the present moment. It keeps you a step removed from life itself. You become the observer, the planner, the manager, but not the participant. And in that distance, joy is dulled, connection becomes strained, love becomes conditional, because everything must fit within the parameters of safety that control demands. But love, truth, inspiration, these things cannot be controlled. They can only be received. And to receive, you must first release. You must soften the parts of you that are still bracing for impact. You must acknowledge the part of you that's scared to lose, scared to be hurt, scared to fail. And instead of controlling more tightly, you must meet that part with compassion. This isn't about giving up responsibility, it's about shifting your center of gravity. Instead of placing all your power in the outer world, trying to fix and manage and control, you begin to anchor within. You begin to trust that what is real can hold itself. That you do not need to supervise your own becoming. That if something falls apart when you stop controlling it, perhaps it was never meant to stay. And if something remains when you let go, perhaps that's where truth begins. Letting go is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is knowing that your power was never in holding everything together. It was in your willingness to surrender what no longer serves you. It is in your ability to feel the fear of collapse and allow it anyway. Because what collapses is not you, it is the illusion of who you thought you had to be. And in the quiet after the letting go, something new begins to rise. Something softer, something more whole, not because you forced it, but because you finally made room. You were never meant to hold it all. You were meant to trust what holds you. There is a quiet intelligence woven into the very fabric of your life, one that often escapes your awareness because you are too busy chasing what you think should be. You run, you strive, you grasp for what you believe will finally bring you peace, success, or validation, yet somehow it keeps slipping just out of reach. What you fail to see is that this grasping blinds you to what is already unfolding. You become so consumed with the destination that you overlook the signs guiding you from within. You miss the truth that everything you are searching for begins the moment you start to trust the process rather than trying to outpace it. When you obsess over progress, you interrupt your own unfolding. Growth, real growth, does not come from constant effort. It comes from allowing. There is a time for action, of course, but there is also a time for letting things come to you. Most people never learn this. They spend their lives pushing against life, demanding results, timing, outcomes, as if life is a machine that must respond to their command. But life is not a machine. It is an organic, living process. And like anything alive, it responds best to presence, not pressure. Look at nature. The tree does not force itself to grow. It leans toward the light, and the growth follows. The river does not plan its path. It follows the shape of the land, yet it always reaches the sea. Your life is no different. There is a pattern emerging beneath the surface, and if you slow down long enough to feel it, you will begin to notice how everything has been leading you through joy, through pain, through every unexpected twist, not toward something random, but toward what is essential, toward what is deeply yours. But in order to see it, you must stop overriding it. You must release the belief that your value is defined by how fast you can change, how much you can do, how many goals you can tick off before the year ends. That frantic pace does not bring wisdom. It brings burnout, and more importantly, it makes you deaf to the voice within that has been trying to speak to you all along. This voice is quiet because it does not compete with your noise. It does not argue with your doubts. It waits until you are ready. And to be ready, you must be willing to trust that what needs to happen will happen, in its own way, in its own time. When you stop fighting the rhythm of your life, you begin to move with it, and then something strange happens. Things start to make sense. You find yourself in the right place without having tried to get there. You meet the right people, stumble into the right opportunities, feel the right insight rise up from within, not because you calculated every step, but because you finally trusted the steps to reveal themselves. Letting go of the obsession with results does not mean abandoning your vision. It means surrendering your compulsion to control how and when it unfolds. There is a greater intelligence at work in your life, one that sees the whole picture, not just the fragment you're focused on. What feels like delay is often preparation. What feels like failure is often redirection. What feels like nothing happening is often everything quietly falling into place. You can only recognize this when you shift your attention from what is missing to what is moving. Look around. Where are the small nudges pulling you? Where is the energy opening rather than closing? What keeps returning to your awareness, not with anxiety, but with quiet persistence? These are the signs, these are the ways your soul speaks. And when you stop rushing, you start hearing. Trust is not the absence of questions. It is the willingness to stay present without demanding answers. It is the courage to believe that your becoming does not need your constant interference, only your consistent presence. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are exactly where you are supposed to be to learn what you need to learn, feel what you need to feel, and let go of what no longer belongs. And in that space, between letting go and arriving, everything begins to align, not because you forced it, but because you finally trusted it would. There is a peculiar peace that arrives when you finally stop needing everything to make sense. For so long you've been trained to believe that understanding is the key to freedom, that if you could just figure it all out, if you could make the pain fit into a clear narrative, or if you could trace the exact reason why things happened the way they did, then you would be free. But meaning doesn't always come in neat explanations. Sometimes it comes in silence, sometimes in surrender, and sometimes in the choice to stop chasing meaning and simply allow the moment to be what it is. The compulsion to assign meaning to every experience can become another form of control. You think that if you name it, you can tame it. If you define it, you can manage it. But life isn't a math problem, and you aren't here to calculate your way through it. There are chapters that will make no sense while you're living them. There are people whose presence or absence you won't understand until years later. There are decisions you'll question until suddenly, one day, they fit perfectly into the greater mosaic of your life. But you won't see it by force, you will see it by faith. Faith is not blind belief. It is the decision to keep walking even when you don't have all the answers. It's the willingness to stand still when your mind screams for resolution. And most of all, it's the trust that something wiser than your intellect is carrying you through. You may not see it yet, but something inside you already knows. The same intelligence that causes your heart to beat, your lungs to expand, your wounds to heal. That same force is guiding the architecture of your becoming. You don't need to understand every brick to trust the house is being built. Too many people live trapped in mental loops, revisiting old pain, analyzing old choices, demanding explanations from a life that has already moved on. But you cannot extract clarity from the past while you're still rejecting the present. You must come to terms with the truth that not everything needs to be wrapped in meaning to matter. Some things are just what they are, seasons of growth, moments of collapse, phases of awakening. Not punishments, not rewards, just movement, just life, in its raw and sacred unfolding. And when you stop forcing meaning, meaning begins to find you. It comes in the quiet realization that you're no longer angry about what happened. It shows up in your ability to hold pain and gratitude in the same breath. It whispers through your resilience, your softness, your unexpected ability to love again. These are the forms that real understanding takes, not mental definitions, but embodied wisdom, not intellectual clarity, but inner peace. Meaning is not something you must invent. It is something you recognize in hindsight. It rises from experience, not analysis. And the more you allow life to teach you on its own terms, the more those teachings integrate into your soul. They shape your character, they deepen your compassion, they soften your gaze toward the world. You begin to see that even the darkest parts of your journey had their place, not because they were right or deserved, but because they woke something in you that could not be woken any other way. There will always be questions you cannot answer. There will always be days when the path ahead seems obscured by fog. But clarity is not always the goal. Sometimes presence is. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to remain exactly where you are, uncertain, open, willing. Let yourself breathe there. Let yourself stop needing life to explain itself before you allow yourself to feel peace. Because peace doesn't come from figuring it all out. It comes from releasing the need to do so. And in that release, in that sacred pause, you may just discover the one thing you've been searching for all along. Not answers, not control, but the quiet knowing that everything is unfolding just as it should. If this message spoke to something deep within you, don't rush to fix it. Don't race to apply it. Just sit with it. Let it settle. Let it reshape you in silence. Now is the time to trust your life more than your fear. Close the tabs in your mind. Take a deep breath. Do nothing. And just watch. how everything begins to fall into place. Now pause, close your eyes, and let go. Then, share this with someone who needs to stop trying and start trusting.